Hello Year 7, so this is our final lesson on plastic pollution in the oceans, and for today's lesson you should be finishing off your projects, but I also just want us to just have a little bit of a chat and a little bit of a think about what the future could possibly hold for our oceans and what your own ideas and thoughts are as regards to that. So let's just have a little look at what you should have done so far. Okay, so far you should have lots of good facts, interesting images. If you have been doing written work, the majority of that should be in your own words. If you have decided to do a model, then that's fine, but it needs to be eye-catching and you need to have been imaginative about including plenty of information. And that information you should be including in your work includes details on how plastic gets into the ocean, what the consequences are for sea life, and how the oceans could be cleaned up. Okay, so have a little look at your work and just think to yourself, have you done so far what you need to do, and what is it that you need to do over this lesson to make sure that you are finished on time? So what we are going to look at today in our final lesson is just your own ideas, thinking about, can you think about any inventions or any ideas that could help to clean up the seas? Do you think there is hope for the future, and can we humans change our ways, or are we just too selfish? Do we not think enough about what our actions are and what those actions can lead to? Now, when it comes up with ideas for cleaning the seas, it doesn't always necessarily mean that you have to invent a machine. I just want to show you something that I think was a really good idea that I came across on the internet. An American artist made these absolutely incredible models, and all of these models are made out of plastic waste from the ocean. And they took all this plastic waste and they've repurposed it to make these really quite stunning models of sea life, and they displayed these on Palm Beach in America. And the money that was raised by the project was put back into cleaning the oceans, and it was also just a really clever way of making tourists who were visiting Palm Beach think about their own use of plastic and their own waste and what they were doing with their waste, and just making sure that they were thinking about disposing of it properly and carefully. I want you as well to have a little bit of a critical mind as well, and really think about things carefully, and just sort of think to yourself sort of, are all of the solutions that we have talked about as good as they first seem? So last lesson I told you a bit about CocaCola and the big campaign that has been running against CocaCola, because they are the world's biggest polluter of single-use plastic, so plastic that you use once and then chuck away. And we sort of talked about how, first of all, Coca-Cola said that by 2030 they would be recycling all of their plastic bottles. And then more recently they changed their mind and said, well, actually, no, we're not even going to do that. We're going to go one better. And all of our bottles by 2023, so really soon, will be made out of plants. And then those bottles will just biodegrade away to nothing. Because as you know, if you make bottles out of plastic, they never biodegrade away to nothing. They break down, and those bits of plastic get smaller and smaller until they become microplastics, but they never really go away. Whereas if you make a plastic-like material out of plants, then that will biodegrade away to nothing. And that sounds really great, doesn't it? You're like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. We can make plastic out of plants, and then when we don't want that plastic anymore, we can just chuck it away and it biodegrades and it turns into nothing because it's just made out of plants. Brilliant. And it does sound fantastic. And, you know, it certainly is pretty great for these guys living under the sea, you know, not having to worry about plastic pollution. But, and there's a really big but, think about how much plastic we get through. Okay, just really think about it for a minute. Look around the room that you're sat in and ask yourself, how many things are made from plastic? If I just look around the room that I'm in, I've got my printer, I have got CD cases, I've got my partner's ridiculous Lego collection that I'm looking at, I've got a plastic bag with my jelly sweets that I'm currently scoffing. I've got my computer, I've got my laptop, I've got a compass hanging up, I've got a vacuum cleaner. There's just so much stuff made of plastic. I've got a chew bar wrapper that I've just lobbed on my desk. So, you know, there's loads and loads of things that we have that are made out of plastic. If we're going to make all those things out of plants, my goodness, that is a lot of plants. And where are those plants going to come from? Well, unfortunately, something that we're discovering about plastics produced from plants is that it's causing massive deforestation, because we're getting huge areas of rainforest being cut down in countries like Brazil or Malaysia or Indonesia. And one of the reasons they're being cut down is to grow plants to make plastic type materials. And so we are solving one problem, but we're creating another one. So that's no good, okay? If we are going to solve this problem of plastic in the oceans, we've got to find a way of doing it where we don't create a new problem. And we can't solve the problem of plastic in the oceans by creating deforestation somewhere else. That isn't going to work. So, what can we do? What can we do as individuals? Well, sometimes it's about really, really simple changes. And this is one big, simple change that we can all probably recognise and we can all do better with. It's just not buying fruit and veg that's wrapped in unnecessary plastic. I mean, sometimes plastic's great with food. It stops it going rotten, it stops it going off. But I think we can all agree that there is no need to wrap an apple in a polystyrene dish with cling film over the top of it, okay? So simply by not buying things like that, by refusing to buy them and thinking, well, do you know what, I really want an apple, but if the only apples you've got are wrapped in plastic, I'm just not going to buy it and I'll have something else instead. I'll go to a different shop. Now, if we can do that as consumers, those shops will soon turn around and stop producing vegetables wrapped in plastic. And that's what we've seen happening, because now lots and lots of shops have their vegetables looking like this. And you take your own little fabric bag and you take it and you put all your veg in there, and brilliant, we're not producing plastic waste. And loads of big shops, places like Sainsbury's or Aldi, do their veg like this now. So that just goes to show that by small changes we can have a big impact. So see if you can think of any other small changes that you could do. Things like not buying fizzy pop but buying squash instead. Okay, that squash still comes in a plastic bottle, but because you add water to it, you don't need so much squash, you don't buy so many plastic bottles. It's another really good example of making a little sacrifice and helping the environment by doing that. So, rest of today's lesson, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to finish your project, okay? So here we have got a project checklist, and you're going to need to go through this and make sure you've done it all. So, your causes of plastic pollution, your different types of plastic pollution, the consequences for sea life, how we can clean the oceans up, any ideas of your own, and what you think the future holds. Your work needs to include all of these things. When you've done that, when you've finished, well, how do you hand your work in? If you've done your work on a computer, you can simply email it to your teacher. Brilliant, dead easy. If you've done something that's more practical, like a leaflet or a poster or a model, you're going to need to take a few photos of it and email that to your teacher instead. Now, it might be that you don't quite get your project work finished today by the end of the lesson. That is fine, really. Ideally, it should be finished today, but if you don't finish it today, then that's fine. You can spend a little bit more time on it, sort of think of it as being like homework, and just make sure that you have got it to your teacher before your next lesson, okay? If you have got any problems or any difficulties with that, please make sure you email your teacher and let them know what the problems are, and I'm sure they'll do everything that they can to help you, okay? So that's it for our plastic pollution project, and I and all of your other teachers really look forward to seeing what kind of work you have produced. Okay, thanks everybody, goodbye and see you later.